Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another episode in the Spigot series. In this episode, I'm going to show you how you can create event listeners in their own classes, and then also how to cancel your events. Okie dokie, so last episode we saw how to use event listeners to listen for events, which are just, things that happen within the game, and the listeners just run code whenever those events are triggered. We saw how to do it down here. All you got to do is just implement the listener interface, and that's how you can do that. But in terms of design, it's better to just separate those listeners into their own classes. So they have their own space, separation of concerns. So you know where to find the listener, where to edit the code. It's not, jumbled up with something else like your other code. And yeah. So what I like to do is just create those listeners in a new package called listeners. Or you can call it events, but listeners makes more sense because we're creating an event listener. So we're going to make a new Java class, and I'm going to call this first listener ExpBottleBreak listener. So this is a event listener that would be triggered when a XP bottle is broken. Pretty simple, right? So we need to do what we did before inside of the main plugin class, except that we're doing it here. So this time we're going to implement listener on this class here. And we can create a new event listener just the same way as we did before. So event handler, and then public, void, on, and then describe what it's going to be listened for, XP bottle break. And then now the events that we're listening for is going to be exp bottle event. So when the XP bottle event is triggered, we're going to run this piece of code here inside of the curly brackets, the method here. So if you want more information on what this does, you can hover over this and do Control Q, and this will give you some basic information, or you can just look up the Spigot Java docs as I showed you how to do last episode. So you can view all the detailed information about what an XP bottle event provides and what it does and all that, okay? So when this event happens, we can do E dot, and then we have all this information that we can grab from the event. So we can get the show effect, or we can get show effect true or false. So we'll show true if the effect will be shown, false otherwise, pretty simple. We can get the entity, so the actual bottle that was thrown onto the ground or whatever it hit. And then we can also get the hit block. That's pretty cool. So we can get the block that the XP bottle was hit against. That's actually really cool. So we're going to grab that. It returns a block, as you can see here. So we're going to grab that and put it into a block variable. So block is equal to e.getHitBlock. Make sure you import org.bucket.block. And now the block that the XP bottle is being hit against is being saved into a variable. So now we can use it like we did with the variable player last episode. So we can do block dot, and we have all these different block methods that we can use to do stuff with a block. And we're going to explore a lot of these in the future just to play around with it. But let's just see what we can use. Let's see what this one does. Break naturally. Control Q. It says breaks the block and spawns items as if a player had digged it regardless of the tool. That's really cool. So whenever the XP bottle hits that block, it's just going to break it as if a player broke it. So that can be fun. Let's try that out. So good. So now we have our event listener here, the XP bottle break listener. It just implements listener as our listener classes must do. And then also we have the actual listener method itself. So make sure you have the event handler annotation, and then public void on XP bottle break, the actual event itself, and then the code for the event. In this case, we're getting the block that the XP bottle hit, and then we're breaking it. Cool. Now, hopefully you remember this. You need to make sure that you register your event listeners after you create them. So we're going to go to event listeners 2, go to our onEnable method, and we're just going to do get server dot get plugin manager dot register events. Make sure it's a register events with an S like we saw last episode. Enter, or tab rather. And then now we need the listener itself. So this will be the class that represents the event listener that we are working with. So last episode we did this because this main plugin class was actually what we used to create our event listener method. But in this case, we're doing it in an outside class. So we're just going to create a new instance of that class. So new XP bottle break listener. There we go. So that's the listener that we needed to provide. And of course, this is just an XP bottle break listener class, but of course this is valid because XP bottle break implements the listener interface. So it's valid to just pass it in here like this, okay? And then now, if we do Control P, it's asking for an instance of the plugin. So this is still the plugin instance. It extends Java plugin, so we can just pass in this still. That doesn't change. But of course, for outside listeners, you have to create a new instance of that listener and pass it in, okay? So that's simple enough, right? So it should register the listener now, and it should listen for XP bottle breaks. So now let's go ahead and compile the plugin here and try using it within our server. All right, so let's do /pl just to see if the plugin loaded successfully. And there we go, we get event listeners to, awesome, it's green, so that means that it loaded without any issues. So to test this out, let's get an XP bottle and try breaking it against something. Okay, so I've got a XP bottle here, or a bottle of enchanting. Let's go ahead and throw it against something. And it didn't work. So for some reason, this actually returns a null exception because the block variable that we have gotten for right here is returning null for some reason. So if we do Control Q, it does say that it'll get the hit block or else null. So that means that the block variable here is equal to null for some reason. And of course, if you try running a method upon something that is null, you'll just get a null exception. But that's weird because if I throw this XP bottle against the block, it's definitely hitting the block, so I don't know why that would return null. Maybe it's just like broken in one of the new updates, I'm not sure. But let's see if we can do something else to test out this event here. We know the event is running, so that's good, but I want to actually make it useful, so let's see what else we can do. Let's do e dot, and we're gonna get set. Okay, so what we can do is we can edit the experience that is given whenever, of course, the XP bottle is broken. But also we can do set show effect. So I know this is hard to read, but it says this method sets if the particle effect will be shown. This does not change the experience created. Let's try that one. So set show effect true or false. So that means that, so currently if we show this, it'll show all the bubbles here, but we want to make it so that it does not show the bubbles. So hopefully this method here will make it so that it doesn't show the bubbles. Okay, let's see what that if that works. So let's rerun this and throw it into the server. Okie dokie, so I threw it in the server. Now we'll do /reload. Good, and now we'll throw it against something. And there we go, look at that. It breaks the XP bottle, but this time the bubbles don't show up. So there we go. So now you know for sure that the event is running and it's working. The event code is being run. I mean, we knew before because we got the exception, but this is a more concrete example. So really cool, right? So that's how you can create a simple event listener within a different class outside of your main plugin class. And then that's how you register it within your main plugin class. Easy, right? But one more thing I want to show you is how you can cancel an event. So there are certain events within the Spigot API or Bucket API that are able to be canceled. And this is true if it implements the interface Cancellable. So if you see any of these events that are listed here, these events implement the cancelable interface, meaning that they can be canceled. So that means that in your event listener, if you do cancel the event itself is never run. Like it happens, of course. Let's say that a block does dispense something. It'll literally happen, but you can cancel it from happening as if it never happened. So yeah, it's pretty cool. So let's say that you want to prevent players from being able to break blocks. And the block break listener is cancelable, I believe. Let's see, Control F, block break. There we go, block break event. If you click it, called when a block is broken by a player. So if you want to prevent the player from breaking any blocks, you can just, cancel the event. So if it implements the cancelable interface, you know that the event itself can be canceled. Therefore, a block cannot be broken in this case. So how can you cancel an event? If we go back to the cancelable interface, it does provide a method called setCanceled, and then you can put true in here and that will cancel the event. So any events that implements the cancelable interface will have this method for you to use. And then of course there's a Boolean returning method called isCanceled that'll tell you if the event is canceled currently or not. Okay, so let's try this out. We can use any of these methods here, or events, here, but we're gonna try, let's choose one to try. Pig zap, I've never heard of that. It's cool. I didn't know pigs could be zapped. Maybe that's a new thing I don't know about. I don't really play the game too much anymore. Okay, I know what I'm going to use. Let me show you. So let's go back here. We're going to create a new event listener. I like to create a new class for each of my listeners, so just that they have their own little section. So we're going to create a shear sheep listener. So this will obviously be run when a sheep is sheared or shorn. I don't know. So implements listener. There we go. Don't forget to do that. And now we're going to have event handler, public void on shear sheep, something like that. And we're going to use the PlayerShearEntityEvent E. Oh, by the way, the reason I'm using E, not event, is just because, I mean, it's the same thing, right? You can call it whatever you want, but of course E is just a shorthand way of writing events, and you're going to see this commonly within other people's code. So you can do that if you want to, you don't have to, but it's just easier to obviously access the event itself if you just call it E. It's just easier to type and everything like that. So, but I don't want you to be confused, so that's why I do that, just because it's like a shorthand way of doing it. It's more concise. Anyway, so E dot, and we can get all this information. So E dot get entity. So this will be the person that gets the entity the player is sharing. So in this case, if we're sharing a sheep, it'll get the sheep entity, and it'll get the hand that the player is using to shear them, the item that is shearing them. So a shear, and then the player itself that is shearing the sheep. But most importantly here, that is relevant to what I'm trying to show you, is you have the set canceled method here, so we can cancel the event from ever happening. So if we want to prevent all players from shearing sheep, we can cancel the events by calling set canceled and setting it to true by passing in the true boolean. So of course, if you do control Q upon this event here, you can see that the event implements the cancelable interface. So that's how you know that it can be canceled. Really cool, right? So let's get the player that is shearing the sheep. So we'll call it player is equal to E.getPlayer. So now we have a player object for the person that is shearing the entity. And let's also get the entity that is being sheared. So entity is equal to E.getEntity. Awesome. And now we want to check to see, let's say that we want to make this even more advanced. What if we only want them to be able to shear, or what if we want to only prevent them from shearing sheep, but we want them to be allowed to shear other things like mushrooms? Because I asked my stream the other day, and they said that you can shear mushrooms. So I think that it'll make sense to prevent them from shearing sheep, but allow them to shear mushrooms. That's kind of a cool little thing we can add to our event listener here. So to do that, we can do if entity, and we want to figure out a way to check to see what type of entity this is, like what animal it is or what mob it is. So if we want to figure that out, there's a couple of ways we can do it. We can go straight to the Java docs and see what methods are provided by it, or we can just do dot and then go through each of these and read them. But if you actually look at the top, it says event.getType, and this is just because I use it commonly, I believe. And you can see that this returns an entity type enumeration here. So getType, if we do control Q upon getType, it says get the type of the entity. And we want to see if that's equal to a sheep entity type. So if we do entity type, you can see that we have an entity type for each of the mobs of the game. So you can check any of these. Really cool, right? So if we want to see if it's a sheep, we can do entity type dot sheep. Now this will be true. If this is true, this branch here, of course, will be run. So we can do e.setCanceled to true. Now the events will be canceled, and it'll be like it never happened in the first place. The sheep itself will never be sheared, which is really cool. Otherwise, let's send the player a message. So player.sendMessage. This is not a sheep. And then for this one, we'll say player.sendMessage. How about this is a sheep. You can't do that. All right, cool. So this is pretty simple. I hope you understand this. But just as a recap here, of course, we're creating our event listener class, implements listener. Of course, we have the event listener method, and we're doing a PlayerShearEntityEvent. So first, we're getting the player that is actually shearing the entity. So player is equal to E.getPlayer, and then we're actually getting the entity that is being sheared. So in this case, hopefully it'll be a sheep, but it can be any entity if it's shearable. And then after that, we're checking to see what type of entity it is. So now we know that we can do entity.getType, and this will return the entity type enumeration, and then we can do entity type.sheep to see if it's a sheep or not. Or we can change it to anything like zombie, whatever you want to do, right? But of course, zombies are not shareable, so it wouldn't make sense to put it like that right there. And so yeah, if it's a sheep, then we want to tell them this is a sheep, you can't do that, and cancel the event by doing e.setCanceled, because this event is cancelable. There we go. And then otherwise, if it's not a sheep, we'll just tell them player.sendMessage, this is not a sheep, and we're not going to cancel the event, so it should shear them accordingly. So let's try this out, but before we do that, we need to make sure that we register the event within our main plugin class here. So I'd go back. So we'll go back and we'll do get server, .getPluginManager, .register events, new, shear sheep listener, and then this. Awesome. And of course, the more you do this, the more you'll memorize it. If you can't memorize this right off the bat, of course, that's normal whenever you learn something new. But I'll be leaving the code for this episode in the description below, so you can come back to it and you can view how to create an event listener and how to cancel events and all that stuff. So make sure to check that out. I'll link in the description below. Anyway, so now let's run this and throw it into the server. Cool, so we got a sheep here. Let's go ahead and get a new shears. There we go. Let's try it out. Boom, look, there we go. Nothing happens, right? The event is being canceled, and then it says, this is a sheep, you can't do that. So this is what I mean by canceling an event. It'll be as if it never happened in the first place. So as you can imagine, this is very powerful if you want to prevent people from doing certain stuff on your server, like, you know, using TNT, breaking blocks. The possibilities are truly endless. This is a cool example, right? Anyway, so let's get a mushroom. I've never tried to share a mushroom, so I hope I haven't been trolled and lied to. Let's see if we can do that. Oh, cool, it does work. I didn't know that. It turns into a regular cow too. I didn't know that. Okay, so yeah, it lets you do it, and it says this is not a sheep. So our code does work perfectly. Isn't that really cool? Awesome, very powerful. So that's how you can create event listeners outside of your main plugin class, and also how you can cancel your events. Really powerful. In the next episodes, we're actually going to make our first plugin, so I hope you're really excited for that. We're going to make a join plugin, so when you join the server, it has a custom join message, sort of similar to what we did last episode. But for this example plugin, it's going to be a little more advanced, so stay tuned for that. If you want to see the code for this episode, like I said, it'll be in the description below, so you can check it out, bookmark it, come back to it later on. Also in the description will be a link to our Discord server, so you can join that, get some new friends, ask for help. You know, it's a really great programming community, and you can meet a lot of people there with the same interest as yourself. And also, one more final thing is that if you want to support this channel, you can click the join button below this video, and you can join this channel as a member for as low as 99 cents a month, and you can cancel anytime. You get some cool perks like early access to all of my new videos, a cool rank on my Discord server, so you can show everyone how cool you are, and also you can just see yourself on the screen like you see right now. So thanks to everyone who has, you know, become a member. If you can't become a member yourself, that's okay too. I appreciate you watching my videos anyway. Alright, so thanks for watching. If you want to see more, subscribe, and